Hello, everybody. Welcome to Today in Space. This week, we actually get to hang out with somebody. It's not just me talking to a wall, so that's a little more exciting. But this week, we have Michael from the Scene Snobs and the variety of shows that he's involved with. I met Mary the mommy, back when we went to the NASAsocial, CRS 19. That's how I got acquainted with them, and it's really cool to have him on today. Michael, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate that. It's a great time.
Yeah, man. So let's start at the beginning before we get too involved, because I can go off on tangents here. We're here to talk about Star Trek. We're here to talk about some sci-fi, because, science fiction is really it's the way that the story of science and it makes people interested in science. I mean, it's the most powerful thing for getting people involved. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but tell me about you. Tell me about how you got into podcasting, and then how you got into sci-fi and Star Trek, and we'll start from there.
Well, I got into podcasting. I kind of fell into it years ago. I'd say about 10 years ago. Well, before that, just to back up a little, I was working out, and I worked in New York and Los Angeles as a production manager and associate producer in movies. And I got out of that. I came back to New Jersey, where I grew up, about 2011. I had to come back. I had a family member pass away, and just kind of need to help out there. And I got involved with a guy from high school. He started his own website. At the time, it was MarioLikesMovies.com, which unfortunately is no longer together. He followed another journey, and I support him on that. But I was writing for him and producing his videos, and had a great time with that. But he had a podcast, and I didn't know really what they were at the time. It was just something that kind of was like very new, and I just joined in for a few episodes, and I fell in love with it, and then we kind of kept going with it. And then in 2013, I moved to Virginia with and two buddies of mine, and I started Mystery Elephant Podcast, which was a comedy show. That was a lot of fun. We took that for like 5 years. We did that, and then that kind of expanded after one of the guys fortunately had some issues with family and things like that, and he kind of had to leave it behind. So I just started putting together the Scene Snobs. It was a little, I just would write movie reviews on Facebook, and it turned into thescenesnobs.com, which is now about 9 shows, podcasts, and videos. So.
Yeah, that is. First of all, I think that's awesome. I think I want to go back a little bit, because I'm really interested about what made your switch. You were writing and producing movies, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What made you switch? What made you get out of that and kind of get into this kind of what am I looking for? Self-employed, working for yourself. Like where did this switch come?
Well, it was kind of the forced move back to New Jersey. It took me out of the Los Angeles element. Mm-hmm. I was sad to go, but it was just kind of a responsibility I had to go and take on, which I was happy to do. And because I was out of that element, I still took jobs doing filmmaking and producing things, but it just wasn't the same. Mm. And once I fell into podcasting, I really enjoyed it, and I saw a future there. Not just in where podcasts could go, but where the internet and entertainment on the internet could go. And it was early on, like, this is only stuff we talked about in film school, and now watching it come to fruition. And I envisioned a chance to start a channel even years ago then, that would be, all entertainment, all different types, art, artists from different facets, like yourself, like with the science background, like where people can learn not just about art, but about different subjects, and it all comes together in an entertaining facet, if you will.
No, that's great. Give us a list. Give us a breakdown of all the different varieties of shows that you guys have going on.
Well, it started with the Scene Snobs podcast, which was just the main show. Is kind of like pop culture, is trying to be more comedic, but like kind of delivering the geek news, if you will.
Sounds very familiar to hear, yeah.
something along those lines, but more movie based because that's my background is more movie based. And then it spawned into my wife and I do a podcast called Marriage Like That, which is all very much parenting and marriage, and not so much advice as it is us trying to kind of figure out and maneuver and navigate through that life. And if people get good advice from it, great. If not, maybe we're learning something,
Do you mind if I ask, do you find that having the podcast where you two can get together and talk about it, do you guys find that as a good, like, I don't know, like a zone for you guys to get into, where if you didn't have it, it would be kind of tough to have those kind of talks? Or, like, I'm just interested.
Oh, yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, she and I have always been pretty open with each other. But I think it really helped to be on the mics together, because now it kind of brings a levity to it, whereas it doesn't feel like it has to be that serious. And I think we kind of both open up in a good way on the mics. And that was happenstance. That was just by accident. Like, we got on, I just told her, I was like, jump on and let's talk. And she did. We did the first episode, and she really enjoyed it. And from there, we have another show we do together, the Married Movie Challenge, which is a video show where we go back and watch, like, the bad and unusual movies and rate them. We've watched The Room. We've watched, other stuff like one of us may not have seen before.
Oh, nice.
So I have a lot of fun going with her on that. I have a wrestling podcast we kind of discussed. That's just the 20-minute wrestling podcast. It's an opinion-based show on wrestling. I'm trying to book some more interviews for that. Quarantine life kind of shut things down on that a little bit, but hopefully soon it will pick back up. But
that whole thing. Let's take a few minutes just to talk about that. I mean, I think we're all one of the great things is, like, I just get to talk to another human being. Like, this is a lot of fun, and it's so weird how this has hit us all. Like, and in the worst and the weirdest part is it's only the beginning, and I think everyone's having a hard time. What are some of the things you guys are doing? Because you guys have kids at home too, so you guys are the warriors of this time. I'm lucky you only have me and my girlfriend right now. So, what's some advice you can give to people, or what are you guys doing to get through? I guess some things.
Well, it's so unprecedented and it's so crazy because here in Virginia they shut down schools for the rest of the year.
Oh, just no more school for the year, basically.
Yeah, they're doing everything online, so they're not going to. My 8-year-old's not going back to school for until next year. So I mean, it's tough for him to not be able to see his friends, and all his friends in the neighborhood. It's it's kind of social distancing. Like, you guys can't go over there, So it's tough, but we are keeping them. I've seen a lot of things that really help on the internet. Like, there's a lot of advice out there. Of things you can do, but I also believe in free play and using imaginations, and, like, you guys go ahead. We'll be here. We'll sit in a room with you. We'll talk to you all day long, no problem. But we want you guys to go out and have fun. And they've been having a lot of quests lately, which they were using that term. So I love it. Brothers going out and just, like, trying to have quests. Reminds me of the movie Onward.
Oh yeah, we just picked that up. I haven't watched it yet, but I heard it was really, really good.
Get your tissues.
Yes. Oh man, no, that's great. I mean, I think the positive I'm trying to take out of it right now is that I think, I know life's going to be different when we get back to things. So the question is, like, how do things get different? Do we move towards, hey, we're a little bit more polite. Hey, we all get shut in for 2 months, 3 months, or God knows more than that. And it actually made us want to talk to people again. This is the positive, optimistic side of things that I'm hoping for. And I'm also kind of looking to, surprisingly, I found out last week, that it makes sense, but a lot of astronauts have a lot of really good advice on how to deal with this. They're isolated on a space station where there's nobody but the crew around them, so there's a lot of really good advice that they're giving out. So it's weird times. It's definitely weird times.
I don't want to belittle anything that's going on right now in a way of saying that I'm happy to see the optimistic and the hopeful side of people that have been coming out is kind of been a joy to see, because we've been going, it seems, especially on the internet, into this weird cancel culture, and not getting in any sort of political type of talk, but like it's just, it seems to have been dragging everybody down. But I think a light that has happened with this quarantine, this pandemic that's been going on, is so many people have been supportive of each other and helpful in these times, and it's been a joy to watch. It really has. I've seen people connect that you would never think would connect.
Yeah.
And I, at least something like that, a good side of it can come out,
I'm with you 100%, man. I agree. That's been the really nice side of what you, like you said, not to belittle it, but yeah, that's been nice to see. Yeah. It's almost like we needed to get pushed just past the line. It's like we've been riding that line for so long of it's not bad enough yet, and luckily it wasn't a war, but not that doesn't mean people aren't dying. But regardless, we're here to talk movies because we all have that time to spend. So we're gonna dive into let's talk top 5 sci-fi movies. You're a big sci-fi guy, so give me your top 5.
Well, I do have to preface these because they're very different in a way, and I chose, maybe not in the specific order, but I chose the 5 sci-fi movies that when I watched them for the first time, they really spoke to me. And that would be Empire Strikes Back, RoboCop, The Day the Earth Stood Still, the original, which still holds up in my opinion, Wrath of Khan, and Jurassic Park.
Oh, those are solid choices, man. Jurassic Park was great. I remember that scene in the kitchen where the raptors come in. I had nightmares about that for years, but it was like such a good scene because it actually it was somewhat like, man, if this really did happen, that was a good way to go about it as a kid, to survive.
Yeah, it was fantastically played by those kids too. They were fantastic in the movie, and that was actually the movie I was big into movies beforehand, but that was a movie where the scene where the Brachiosaurus, they first see the first dinosaur for the first time, was that Brachiosaurus, and just that larger than life as a kid watching it on the screen, I looked at it and I was like, this is what I want to do. Yeah. And my friends were like, make dinosaurs? I'm like, no, make movies. And I was like, because I want to make people feel like I just felt. So
yeah, man, it really is magical, especially when you think about how it was all green screen and just the power of acting, how they really made you believe they were looking at dinosaurs, or at least when you're a kid and you're excited watching it. It's that's a great one. RoboCop's solid. That's definitely one of those movies that you think about where the world is heading. Yeah. You're like, this wasn't too far off. Especially with the way the world was going before this whole pandemic thing hit.
A lot of people, that would probably be number 1 on my sci-fi list.
Wow.
Because it's so out there, but when I first saw it, I was like, this is like a great mix of science fiction and action. And just it's like every kid's fantasy. I'm like, you have a robotic cop.
Yeah.
I saw it as a young kid and with my brothers, and it was just blew me away,
Yeah. I want to. We talked about we caught up on one of your live shows. You were talking about movies, and it's not on your list, but I know it's a big movie for you. Back to the Future, and just the trilogy of its own. I mean, that trilogy, the first movie and the way that they tie in each movie after that, the story is solid, it intertwines. I don't think that there's one of those 3 that is bad. I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, it's amazing.
Well, yes, we're touching down on that. Actually, if I turn the camera just a bit, that's my Back to the Future wall. So I had to have all my memorabilia framed and everything, and the reason being, Back to the Future is my favorite movie of all time. Hands down, there is no other. It would be funny in film classes, and then especially in screenwriting classes, to tell the teacher that, because they'd be like, really? And I'm like, But why isn't it on my sci-fi list? Because for me, it's that nostalgic, like, anytime I watch this movie, it brings me back to the very first time. Those last 5 minutes of trying to get the car to the cable still thrills me.
Hell yeah.
They built that tension up perfectly, and I truly love it. It's a fun movie from beginning to end. And great question with the trilogy. I don't think any of them are bad because they were so planned perfectly. If you go back and there's Easter eggs they're still finding to this day that nobody has seen before.
Yeah.
And that's just proper planning. And I think trilogies, or anything for that matter, like limited series, stuff like that, you're always going to have a problem with the last one or the last episode or whatever it is. Mostly because we never want something to end. So I think automatically we go into the ending with this is going to be bad, because you just don't want it to go away.
Yeah.
But that was tied up beautifully. The whole thing from beginning to end. And to me, I think, as much as I love the Holy Trilogy of Star Wars and so much else, this was so well planned. To me, this is probably the best trilogy out there because of it. It's not a perfect movie, I know that. There's plenty of plot holes in it and such. But because they all complement each other so well, and they were planned out in a right way, left open. The first one was left open just well enough so that way you could have the second one and third one. That's why it's the perfect trilogy for me.
Yeah. The documentary that came out, what was it, a few years ago, where they broke down like how each one was made and the challenges they had. I had no idea until I watched that Michael J. Fox was green screened in to the entire first movie. And that, when you go back and you watch it with that in mind, like, it's such a, for lack of a better word, a mind fuck. You're like, whoa, wait a minute, wait. I didn't know that. And then it adds to the whole, like, well, he's not setting the timeline yet. Like, there's so much beauty to that. And that was, I don't think, planned at all. But,
no, and it's funny because Thomas Wilson, who played Biff in the movie, says that, and I've gone back and rewatched it now, and this is fairly recently he said this, Eric Stoltz, who originally played Marty McFly, is still in one shot.
Really?
Yeah, it's the shot where he punches Biff. They never took the shot of him punching Biff, so it's still Eric Stoltz's arm and shoulder.
Oh my god! I gotta go back and watch that. That's insane.
So it's it, and he came out with that, and I'm like, oh my! How did I never know? Because it's a black jacket. It's not Marty's normal jacket.
Oh.
So but they couldn't get the fight scene. They already had Biff's shots done. They just had to film them with Marty, and they were like, all right, we didn't get the punch. Let's just use the original.
Damn, that mind blown. That's crazy.
That's why I love those movies. There's still things today that pop up.
Oh, man. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, Back to the Future, it has such a big thing in my life too, because so you talked about how you kind of started another podcast and then found yourself to where you are today. I did the same thing. Today in Space started as a segment I was doing on a show with one of my friends from home, Mike Small, and we stopped doing it because we both didn't have the same time to put into it, and so I started this, and he's still an amazing friend of mine, but we are Marty and Doc. Like, I am his Doc, he's my Marty, and that's just, it's always going to be that way. So I always love that dynamic. Okay, so let's move on to, I want to talk about your top 5 space movies, because it's a space science podcast. So let's go there next.
Well, it's funny you say that too. Like, again, these are movies that I adore. I think they're fantastic. One actually comes on the list from my sci-fi list, but it's Empire Strikes Back. Space movie wise, it's just because when you talk about space, I don't think the movie should just have to take place in space. Mm-hmm. Even if the goal is space or you're on another planet, you're basically showing space, and Empire Strikes Back does that perfectly, I think, with Hoth and Dagobah and Cloud City over in Bespin. Like, they've opened up that world from the original in such a big way, and the scale of the ships and such. But So Empire Strikes Back is a great space movie in my opinion. Alien is, which is very funny to say because it's very condensed and not much takes place in space.
No.
And, well, essentially it all takes place in space, but you never really feel it. You feel claustrophobic in that movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that's the beauty of space is like if you're up there, no matter how, even though it's called space, you're gonna feel claustrophobic because we're only. So it's a good representation. Another one, this one, for the same reasons that we love Star Trek, Galaxy Quest.
Oh, such a good pick.
It's such a beautiful satire of what Star Trek is and is to people and why we love it. Again, I will also say with the Orville is another one of those. Like
that's one I got to get caught up on.
Oh, you'll love it, especially this season. Apollo 13, because the realism of Apollo 13 is it's just beautiful and well played by all of those amazing actors. I mean, yes, I can go on about Tom Hanks and Kevin Bacon. Bill Paxton, my man Bill Paxton's in it.
Oh, dude. And did you know the Gene Kranz, the actual mission director, one of the main mission directors for that, was involved intimately in that movie to make sure that they got it historically correct because they were planning not to at first. So I'm glad they did.
I'm glad, but I think doing it that way to know that this is everything that was happening in that movie was what happened in real life, like that adds that degree of, oh my God, like look what they were dealing with. Like this is insane. And another one, for the very same reason of Apollo 13, I chose The Right Stuff, which I first saw only about a year and a half ago.
I have to confess, I still have to see it.
I think, trust me, I think you appreciate it. It blew me away when I saw it. So I can't hold it against you because, like I said, it was only a year and a half ago. And Mary, we've been married 5 years now, had been telling me, you got to see this movie. You got to see it. It's great. And I was like, and then just for years, I just was like, I don't know if I'm into it. And I watched it and I was like, how was I not watching this movie at the beginning? I've seen it like 4 times now. It's just that good, and all the acting in it is fantastic.
Oh man, that's on my list. And the good thing is we got plenty of time. So yeah.
Absolutely. I think you'll do a show dedicated to that one because it's a really good movie.
Okay, cool. All right, that's going on the top of the list. Awesome. Did you have anything else on the list?
No, those are the space. I mean, I could go on and on about
solid top 5, man. I like that. Thank you, and I love that there's stuff on there that I haven't seen before. And Galaxy Quest, just touching that real quick, like it's a parody, but it's its own universe at the same time, which is such a that's a beautiful parody if you could do that.
Oh yeah, and I actually, because they did Picard now, would love to see them all return for a sequel.
Oh man,
wouldn't that be great?
That would be great.
It'd be sad because Alan Rickman, of course, rest in peace, Alan Rickman. But you could do something, and I think it could be well done.
I think so.
But yeah, the Galaxy Quest is just still such a good movie.
All right, so let's move on. Let's start transitioning into Star Trek and Picard here. So, who introduced you to Star Trek? How old were you? What was the series you were watching?
Well, when I was a kid, we had I was a latchkey kid, so like both my parents worked. My dad did 2 jobs. My mother was gone all day, so I watched a lot of TV. That was kind of the babysitter, and I had no qualms with it. That's probably why I am where I am now. But reruns were a big thing. They didn't have a lot back then, so the original series played a lot, and I'd watch it because it's a very adventurous series, and I was always into adventure, Indiana Jones, anything like that. That's why I love the journey of Star Wars and such. But Star Trek was just like that original series, which blew me away with all the different worlds they're seeing each week and the adventures they're going on. And I loved the feel of everything. Like you had the command had the different colors and things like that. Like it just resonated with me on a certain level. But then at the same time, they had the Next Generation come out, and I'm like, well, I watched the original series. Let's check this out. So every Saturday we watched it. It was on 7 p.m. on a local channel where I was up in New Jersey, and it was very different. I have to admit, we watched it every week, but it was not the same as the original series.
Yeah.
And I liked it. There were certain characters I liked more than others. LeVar Burton definitely brought me into it because of reading Rainbow.
Yep.
I didn't really like Picard when I was a kid. He didn't like Riker did. Riker was the adventurer.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you.
But as I grew older, I rewatched it maybe about 2 or 3 years ago just to watch the entire series as an adult. And watching it as an adult gives you a completely different perspective. I was always like, Kirk's the best captain, hands down. He beat the Kobayashi Maru. That's it. That, to me, you can never stop that. But rewatching the series again as an adult, even having watched all of the movies in theater, was still spoke to me in such a different way. And Picard, I realized, is the best captain. He is the most well-adjusted, and he's the diplomat who holds strong in his principles. And I was like that.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I grew up on Next Generation. My dad was a huge Star Trek fan, so he grew up the original series, but he was collecting the VHSs for Next Generation. So I remember in my basement we had like right on the wall, like every VHS in order from the series. So that was always fun to watch. And yeah, Picard, I was a big Geordi LaForge fan, and Worf. Those two guys were my jam as far as, like, I don't know. There was something about Klingon culture and just like there was something about it and his character that I really loved. That he was, trying to be Klingon in a human, just in a human world, and the two-parter where he finds out about his family and he has to go to the council. It's amazing. It's good. It's great stuff.
Yeah.
It's
amazing.
I watched it the other day. It's my favorite. It might be my favorite two-parter of Next Generation.
Nice.
So whenever it's on, I try and watch.
And that's the best thing about TNG, too, because as much as I like the original series, and I can pick up on them and watch them when they're on, but TNG, I think, has the most rewatchability, followed by DS9.
Yeah.
I will admit, I've never watched Voyager. I have seen
good
parts, and I want to watch it, but I just, it was at a time where I got a little bit older, and I just didn't get into it at the time.
I'm with you. That's what happened with Deep Space Nine. I had kind of skipped over Deep Space Nine altogether and went straight to Voyager. Nice. So, yeah. No, it's been cool recently, especially with Picard, going back to all the different members of the cast, from Seven of Nine to Picard to Data, Riker, and watching all those episodes and connecting it. That's what's been really cool for me with Picard, the new series, and being able to share it with somebody else. And kind of get them into it brand new was even better. So before we start talking about our thoughts on the series, I did want to show you this. I did want to be as Star Trek as possible, so I did create a comm badge. I will be sending a pair of these to you and Mary the Mommy, so we'll have to set that up. But
thank you so much.
Oh, of course, man.
I will have to tell you, I know exactly where it's going. I have I have every Enterprise of the Eagle Moss Enterprises series, from NC 1701 all the way down to the E.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm going to shadow box them, and underneath is going to have each of their badges.
Oh, that's great.
Actually, I have the NX series from Enterprise too, so like I'm going to add that in, so it will be complete.
Sick.
Not adding the J, I'm sorry to say, but
I get it.
So, but so like that, I appreciate that. That will definitely be the badge that it will go right in the shadow box.
Awesome. I'm on it. So, let's so first of all, before anyone gets started, this will be spoiler alerts. We are going to talk about the finale. So if you haven't seen it, skip through here. We gave you a bunch to listen to beforehand. But what are your overall thoughts on the series? We saw the two-parter. We got together after the first episode, watched the finale. What did you think?
I walked away satisfied. I didn't after the series in a whole kind of, there were some episodes that threw me off. I think it started out really strong, in the middle got really strong, and in the end it ended strong enough. It is so. I'm excited for a second season, which I'm glad they've already said we're doing it. There was like a couple episodes where I'm like, I'll be surprised if this gets a second season. Not that it was bad, but it wasn't recognizable in a lot of ways. It was only recognizable when they were doing the fanfare, in my opinion. But it makes sense now, having watched the finale. He is Picard again. I understand that journey of, he just needed to become Picard again.
I like the way you said that, because it felt, it's funny because I was following online when it was being created, which I don't know if you know, but it was written very quickly.
I heard that. Yeah.
You see, okay, because that blew that. I was thinking of that as the show was going on. I was like, wow, because it like you mentioned, it got progressively better throughout the whole series, and there were moments where I was like, okay, like I'm surprised that they got this done so quickly, and by the end, the way they tied in all those things, and then when I was watching the different episodes to tie it in, I was really blown away with how much they were able to stick to canon and like do Star Trek respect and the fanfare and make sure that whatever was in the past was actually like noted on here. What were your thoughts? So the Picard thing kind of threw me. I remember in the episode, one plot point that kept throwing me was how Data was involved in the creation of these synthetics. Was he so like? I'm still confused by it, honestly, because like they mentioned that Data was involved, but then what was it, 17 years before then was when when the synths had been murdered on that mission with Rios.
Yeah, it's like 14 or 15 years, I think. I don't 100% remember.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, well, when did Data die, and when would he have been a part of this, and when did Bruce Maddox get there? That was the one thing that still threw me. Of course, Sarah, my girlfriend, was watching, was like, oh yeah, no, it made complete sense. She's brand new Star Trek, so I'm like, well, there goes my memory. But was there anything else plot-wise that you thought was either a hole or just didn't quite story-wise make it through?
Well, if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I am trying to remember too. I haven't watched Nemesis in a long time, but when Data died at the end of Nemesis, and they had before, didn't they have the chip for him so they could like kind of recreate Data?
Yes, yeah, and so he did try and download his positronic brain to B4 so that he could survive, but something happened. It wasn't like complete. If I understand or remember correctly.
And that was like, for me, when you saw before in the drawer at the beginning, Maddox's drawer, I had just felt maybe he took that chip and somehow figured a way to build on that in his, in that world that they introduced us to. And that's kind of what he's built Data off of, and where that kind of came from. So I understood where he was, and it seemed like he was keeping a part of Data alive, and that's why we got the ending we did, which I thought was beautiful. And
I haven't cried that much in a really long time. Like first for Picard, because I hadn't caught yet what was happening, hadn't thought about the Golem and about that, which just sidetrack. What a beautiful way to bring the idea of inserting someone's consciousness into a synthetic body. Like, that's the thing I love about Star Trek, is they're really able to like share the sci-fi stuff for the better and for the worse. But the beautiful side they do a really good job of.
Oh yeah.
The Borg is a perfect example of the bad, but because they're one of the best bad guys of all time, in my opinion.
Oh.
But yeah, I thought that was beautiful, and Data getting to have that human experience was just, I mean, beautiful and sad and amazing at the same time.
And it made sense. It was funny because I was thinking about it, and we had kind of talked a little bit in messaging. But when we talked about Insurrection, I said that's my favorite. I think we were on one of the live shows, but I talked about Insurrection being my favorite next gen movie, and the reason for that is I think Data shows the most humanity in that movie, but in a way he gets his moral code from Picard.
Yeah.
All the way through, and he shows in that because just to go back and talk about Insurrection for a second, if you watch Insurrection, you realize that everything they're doing is right because Data did it first.
Yeah.
And Data can't be wrong.
Right.
So if he is fighting against this, and and he was from the beginning. They said they were malfunctioning, but it's not. It's Data doing the right thing.
Right.
And it's based on Picard's principles and just what he has studied over time in Picard and looking up to him. So when we get to this finale and he's laying on that couch dying and the only person he can imagine being there holding his hand is Picard, that makes perfect sense because I wanted to see everybody around him.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have made sense because for him, his code, the way who he studied to try and be the most human was who tried to be the least human on the show.
Yeah.
In the sense of like pulling in his emotions and being steadfast in all his thoughts, which was John Luke. So that added another layer of beauty to Data's death and closure in this season. So.
Yeah, and I half expected it to be Tasha Yar that was holding his hand, but I don't know why. That's
again, that was another one. I was like, it would have been beautiful if she was there too, but it did. In the end of it, like just because of their closeness and because of his respect for Picard, and a weird way, a being that cannot respect anything because he just doesn't have the capability, still held that high regard for his captain.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was cool that they kind of made like synthetic brain waves. Like Data was able to access Picard's synthetic brain through like just him having a cybertronic brain. Like it was, I don't know, it was they did so many things that made the idea of artificial intelligence closer to, I don't know, I felt like I have a closer appreciation of it now of what could be, even though they did a great job of the fight between synthetics trying to save themselves versus us. I mean, I thought that was a great plot point.
Yeah, they had so much going on at that time that just all those battles, even like within themselves and things like that. Like you were right, they were just trying to survive. They didn't want to die, and they were going to bring on the end of all living beings to do so. But Picard had to show he's willing to sacrifice himself for them to do the right thing and not kill anybody. Yeah. And that was handled beautifully because this was not a crew. This was just an amalgamation of different beings thrown together on an adventure that had to become a crew.
Yes.
And the only way they could do that is by Picard doing it. Because I was like, I wanted the Roddenberry principle of everybody, the crew should be handling this together to solve the problem. And then I realized, like, this is not a crew, though. They're all figuring this out. They have no completion to be a crew. And Picard's not Picard yet. He's not the leader they need to look up to. Yeah. So his death is what had to bring them together. It's essentially your Phil Coulson from the Avengers. Right. And they did that, and
that's a great comparison. I love that.
So, and he was that symbol for them to stand up against it and sacrifice himself and be what the Federation is supposed to be, and bring it back and save the Federation in the process.
Yeah,
They did come out. They did protect these synthetics that they've outlawed, and I just thought that was great. And I thought, which actually weird, just to kind of go off on a little bit of a trivia fact. Did you know Commander O is Kamiko from Karate Kid 2?
Whoa, 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 whoa. What?
Yeah, she played Kamiko in Karate Kid 2.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Blew me away, too, because I was doing some research before we did. And I was like, she was in Karate. That was her first movie.
Damn.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. I don't even know what she's been in since. That's crazy. Wow, talk about a roundabout career there. That's, wow, crazy.
I guess now she has to show up on the cover show.
True.
But yeah, I just saw that. But like, I think she did a great job throughout the season. But I just thought in this last, I thought they should have really let her shine. I feel like they wrote the villains too quickly in this. Like, except for Narek. Narek was a great addition, and even Narissa. They were the only two, but they seemed like, compared to like villains of the past in Star Trek, they seemed sort of like on a bit of a lower level to comparatively.
They had a lot of bad guys.
They did.
They really did, and like episode spanning or season long bad guys, which was interesting. You mentioned, so going back on one of the two-parters, your top two-parters of TNG that you gave, one of them was Unification. And that's where Spock shows up in the Next Generation series, and he's trying to unite the Vulcans with the Romulans. Well, the Romulans with their Vulcan past. And they had such a great opportunity with where she was one of these few half Vulcan, half Romulan characters, and it didn't touch on that at all. There was no idea of unification or anything. It was just she was just a mole.
And the fact that she is obviously leading the Romulans, not just the Tal Shiar, but the Romulan Empire. She's essentially a general in this army. So she is leading. You could have done so much more for her, because now you've sparked the Civil War again. Mm-hmm. Well, not Civil War. I'd say Cold War. My apologies, but you sparked.
Between Romulans and kind of the Federation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, it seems like it's going to go that route. Obviously, the Romulans are probably not as powerful as they were, but they could gain that. Yeah. Sort of on par with like the First Order in the new trilogy of Star Wars, like kind of building that power up. And that would be exciting to watch the Romulans do. Mm-hmm. They just kind of fell flat with her. Like she got shot down by Riker real quick.
Oh, that was such a good scene too.
It really was. And it was Riker at his finest. That's the type of admiral you're going to see from Riker. Yeah. Because you've seen it before. He looks just like he did I'm sorry, I have it written down. All Good Things. When he was the older Riker.
Yes.
He was the admiral. He looks just like he did. Yes. They did it perfectly. He's sitting in the chair with like cocked back, kind of like.
The only thing missing is him kind of leg up. That's the only thing missing here.
Oh, he has to throw that leg over the chair.
Climb over the chair, leg first. Yeah.
But I love the thing I think I loved about it is I love seeing him and Troy and their life together.
Yeah.
And now he's kind of like this kind of an eccentric old man trying to make pizza. That's essentially what he's doing, and being a dad. And then you turn around and when he's in that chair, he's still Riker. He can still shoot you down. Now that was a great scene. It was not on the same level as Deep Space Nine when the Dominion War started. And they met up with the Federation, and they were just coming right back to take over Deep Space Nine again. That, to me, still gives me goosebumps. That was an amazing, just amazing shot of all of those ships coming. But this was a good one. Yeah. I think they did a really good job with this. And Riker leading the charge was perfect, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I was glad to see that even though, I guess, Riker in the next season, if they meet up again, won't meet the same Picard. The fact that they had those moments together was just, fanfare. It's amazing. I loved it. I'll take more of it. I mean, they just did such a great job of making the fans appreciate what they are, but then giving us a different Picard, a different series that we weren't really used to. And he said that. I remember Patrick Stewart mentioned that. I think he tweeted about it. Maybe it was an article. I don't remember. But he was saying it's not going to be the same Picard. And you're right. It was the journey of him finding himself as Picard again.
Essentially becoming a new Picard, which is the funniest part.
Yeah.
He's essentially a brand new person,
mm-hmm.
and it's not the actual Picard, but he is now going to be the most Picard.
Yeah.
So I do like that. One thing I probably would have done if I had been writing the show, and I'm not saying that's perfect, it would just been a fanfare thing for me, is when he says, I'm on the finest ship in our fleet, this USS Zhang, I believe was what he called it. If they had just cut to Worf on the Enterprise in the bridge saying, the finest ship, just something like that to be like, it's the Enterprise, like, cause they did say, they came out and officially said that Worf is the captain of the Enterprise.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't see that. Oh,
I think that would have been a way to, you've already said it. You've already come out and confirmed this through and in the comic books. That's how it is. You should have just put him in there for that one scene just to make a joke. Because Worf would be so offended that Riker's saying that with the Enterprise.
Oh, that would have been great. But without going too far here, I just want to close up. Thank you for being on, man. I feel like we could talk for hours.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to do another one soon, if you're up for it. Closing out, have you seen? Because for me, I feel like Star Trek has been 2 for 2 now for new shows. Discovery and now Picard. Have you seen Discovery at all?
I have. I'm all caught up on Discovery.
What did you feel? What are your thoughts on where that series is?
The first season I loved. The second season I had a lot of problems with.
Okay.
And the reason for that was I felt like the first season was building to what Star Trek is. It's essentially doing what Picard was doing. I thought was building, like, Picard is now going to be a recognizable show. Whereas Discovery in the second season was like it seemed like they kind of tore apart the Roddenberry principles, which I'm not saying that you have to be completely married to, but Berman stuck with them, and like so many people were just like, and even like if you watch the Orville, they even stick to those principles, and it's kind of, it makes sense, like the bridge crew is always going to solve the problem. It's never one person. They solve it together. They work together as a team. This is what the Federation is. This is what it means. Things like that. And I just feel like they were going a little too espionage with, and took away from that unity of a crew working together. Now I will say, Captain LaRocca was a great captain, played by Jason Isaacs. And Anson Mount as Pike. I'm very excited to see his show.
Yeah, he captured Pike, and the fact that they tied that old original series episode. What is the pilot? Was that the pilot? Yeah, that was beautiful. They are doing, and we talked about this a little bit about, like, there's obviously the two different series. There's Star Trek and there's Star Wars, and I feel like even though there are things we can have gripes about and stuff like that, Star Trek is far and beyond killing it as far as what they're doing in the future and keeping the series what it is and what it was, where, like, I don't know, you tell me what your thoughts are with where Star Wars is, because we've done an episode on it, but
Star Wars disappointed me a great deal. I feel like they had a chance. I feel like they were trying to correct The Last Jedi, and ironically I've always felt The Last Jedi would be a better Star Trek episode than it was a Star Wars episode. But they made it. So I feel like maybe they should have just stuck with the story that they were going to intend with, instead of trying to change everything and make everybody happy. It's like, just stick with what you've got. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but it would have been better, I think, than what we got in Rise of Skywalker.
Mm.
Now, on that scale, though, going to see The Rise of Skywalker, there were things I enjoyed about it.
Mm-hmm.
It is definitely not one of my most hated movies of all time, but
That's good.
it was one of those things that I was like, I'm disappointed in a lot of things with it, but I'd be okay. I'm okay with it. I think they should have used Snoke as the main villain. They should have killed him off so quick, or you should have stuck with Kylo, or however you were going to do it. But bringing back the Emperor, for me, was just cheap. I was like, you had a good ending with Darth Vader going back to the light side by killing the Emperor. Just leave it at that and continue the story. But that's me.
It's interesting. Because I want to ask, because for me, I actually thought that the adjustment for Rise of Skywalker for me was a return back to what I had hoped they were going to do. I did not expect the Emperor at all, but for whatever reason, I mean, for me, if I had to rank them, Last Jedi, that's the worst one of that trilogy for me. It's second is what is it? The Force Awakens, and the third one is actually, I think, the best one of all of them. What's your ranking on that?
I would say for me the best one was Force Awakens, then Rise of Skywalker, and then Last Jedi. But let me ask you this:
Sure.
If the story of The Last Jedi was a Star Trek based movie or show, do you think you appreciated that story more?
It's interesting. I hadn't even thought of that. Give me some more context to how that would be in Star Trek.
Well, just imagine being in. If you take it back a ways, and you did it in like the Kirk style, the new movies, Pine starring as Kirk and such. If you had taken this story, and whether it would probably be the Klingons back then more so, chasing them down because they're in their, for lack of a better term, they're in a neutral zone, and their power is kind of running out, but they're at a point where they can only pace and kind of to try and keep away just far enough out of, and it's kind of a stalemate at the moment where they have to outthink the Klingons chasing them. And then maybe some have to break away and go by a nearby planet to help find some power source or something like that. Like,
I think I agree with you. Yeah, I think that would make a much better. Mainly because I feel, I don't know, there's something about having disposable red shirts that allows you a little more flexibility in the plot. Where it seemed like every crew member that was lost in that was like a devastating loss, and then that made. I don't remember what the admiral or the one who took over for Princess Leia, or Admiral Leia. I don't remember who she was, but she just seemed like such a bad guy almost right away. She had like they didn't give her a chance at all, and it was like, oh, but I'm doing the right thing. So that whole, there was something about the humor didn't line up in that second movie for me, and like every line was. Not every line. I'm being an ass right now, but it was there was just something about it, and maybe it was just because that like, oh, this is not the Star Wars that I wanted. Maybe that's what it is, but the humor didn't line up for me on that one, and the third one for me was it seemed to redeem it for me. I don't know why, if you have the two people, Picard and Skywalker and Luke, who were brought back, I mean, Picard wins that reboot. Easily.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's the best part. Like my arguments for Star Wars versus Star Trek has always been that Star Trek has this great world built. It essentially it's built on the Federation and its principles and things like that. And the bad guys are the bad guys because they don't fit that mold and they don't want to. If you really go back and you look at the Klingons, are the Klingons bad guys? They're a warrior race. That's just who they are. They're being themselves. So you can be sympathetic for them. You can be sympathetic for the Romulans. But when you come to Star Wars, there's no real sympathy for the Empire. There's no sympathy for the First Order. So or the Sith, for that matter, and all. But that's why I think the trilogy, the whole, again, I call it the Holy Trilogy, but that's why it was so great, is because you did have sympathy for Darth Vader.
Mm.
Especially, like, in the first one, yeah, he was bad. And he was very bad. I would say he was at his worst in that one, in A New Hope.
Yeah.
Comparative. But you still had sort of a sympathy because of the way Obi-Wan talked about him,
Mm.
and who he was, and just knowing him and things like that. And then when you found out he is Anakin Skywalker, you're even more so like, oh wow, I don't want him to die. I want him to come back,
Right.
And none of the prequels or this new trilogy had that same effect, in my opinion.
Mm.
It's almost like they tried to over sympathize in the prequels.
Interesting, yeah.
Even kind of the same way with Kylo Ren, over sympathize, where they never really made him the bad guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was always on the line of like, okay, what happened?
Yeah, and I think that they should have taken him off that line once he killed Han.
Yes, I'm with you. Yeah, they never gave him the chance to have fully gone over to the dark side. It was almost like he was. Yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah, I don't know why he would skirt it. And now you could argue Leia, you could say that, but
Mm.
just make him the bad guy. He killed his father. He's willing to kill his mother.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't do that. They kept playing with that notion of him becoming good, and I think it was just to tease us.
Yeah.
And it was just like, but yeah, and that's why for me, Star Trek still wins, because even not liking the second season of Discovery, I'm excited to see where they go in the third season.
Yeah, and we've got that. What, the end of this year is coming out?
Yeah,
So,
at some point it should be coming soon. It might even be May.
yeah, yeah, which would be great for all of us because we might still be indoors.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, now I have one last question, but the cognitive dissonance of wearing a Star Trek badge and asking you a Star Wars question is hurting my brain. Mandalorian. There was something about that universe that you mentioned before, that Star Wars, it doesn't have that same universe built out as Star Trek. But the Mandalorian, I felt like I could watch that show, just him walking through with Baby Yoda and the child, going, and they could have just walked for 30 minutes and I would have watched it. I don't know how you felt about that, but I like what they're doing with this new stuff.
I loved it, and because they put Jon Favreau, who has given us Iron Man and built Marvel on his back, and is now doing that with Star Wars, and he's done so much for us geeks. He's
Elf.
like, yes, he's our exalted one, really. But him doing this show and entrusting all of the talented directors that he did and the writers along the way. And the fact that The Mandalorian is at its heart a beautiful portrait of Western movies.
Mm.
Each
Yeah.
is just a perfect Western feel, which is what Star Wars started out as.
Mm.
That's what George Lucas wanted. He wanted a Western in space. That's what everything is. You think space cowboy, who do you think?
Yep.
And so it was the kind of a return to what that was. Now, I do say that Star Trek's world is built a little bit better, in my opinion, and the journey is what I really appreciate about Star Wars. But I think more so now than before they destroyed the canon of the books, of years of writing, which did build up the world, and you did have different characters in it that really just added this element of, this is so much bigger than what we were seeing. We were seeing one family in this huge, vast region of space in this galaxy, and they took that all away from us.
Mm.
And that doesn't exist anymore. And I think that's why this suffers.
Yeah.
These new movies suffer, because you go back and you read any of those books, but like even Rogue One, it helps spread that world.
Yep.
Solo, which I think gets a lot more hate than it deserves.
I liked it.
I did too, but yeah, I guess I definitely think that it just does not get the respect it deserves. It built that world, It showed us, and even the prequels at a point did too. Like they've opened up the world a little bit. But they never delve too hard into it, like Star Trek does. Like Star Trek, yeah, it may take place on the Enterprise or on Deep Space Nine, but you see it's like Doctor Who. Maybe about the Doctor and his travels, but you see a whole new universe of beings that exist, and there's that acceptance there, So that's why, for me, Star Trek it's built on the same principles as Doctor Who. I mean, it's we're trying to better our world. We're trying to open it up, whereas Star Wars feels more claustrophobic in that way.
Yeah, and they seem to, I mean, and maybe it'll change with the next trilogy that they'll do, but it seems like they, and maybe this is what kind of hurt it a little bit. It felt like we were just reliving the same. Like, I know that there's a cyclical nature to history and all that stuff, and history repeats itself, but I don't know. They hit that drum way too hard for me, and it after the first movie, I was like, another planet killing machine. Really? And it's already built. It's the first movie. Really? I mean, that's how I felt. But
not just that. You're 100% right. But not just another planet-killing machine. It's like, let's take it one step further. It can kill 5 planets. And it's like, really? Come on. Like, you don't have. I understand that you need the dogfighting in it and things like that. And that's an element that we love, is the starship fights. But you can do it so much better. It's not like in World War I or World War II, we only needed to blow up one thing that the Germans made, like
right.
There was some real fighting there with different missions. Go back to history, read about it, the story.
There's so much you could rewrite and just piece together from, I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Why are we going to a casino in The Last Jedi to essentially find, that black market thief dude, whereas you could go behind enemy lines and have to do that, and it'd be so much more interesting.
Yeah. That scene that you just brought up, I just rubbed my face because it infuriated me so much, because everything they did there did nothing for anyone involved. All it did was get them in trouble with somebody who used them. And the animals that they let loose, guess what? Those rich people found them again and put them back in those cages. They didn't go anywhere. Where were they going to go? Where do you think they found them? Well, it was one of those things where I was like, oh, but sorry.
No, but that's essentially with Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, all of it. I think that's where the writing is becoming the problem now in today's world. And I'm actually kind of hoping that changes up very soon, is because we're seeing a big drop in all shows, movies. And the reason being is because I feel like the inclusivity that writers are going for in Hollywood takes away from what they are. You don't need inclusivity in Doctor Who. I don't care if it's a female doctor. I don't care what you make it an alien. Do whatever you want. I don't care. It doesn't have to be a human man. That's not the point. But it was always an inclusive show. Never hate anybody. Always be kind. Always be caring. And accept everybody for who they are. Yep. So why do you need to improve that and make it more inclusive?
Yeah. Well, and there's so much you can do with. I'm completely agreeing with you. And there's so much you can do with. It's almost like it's inclusivity, but it has to be too literal. Where there's so much magic that can happen of expanding people's minds, of taking people out of, the rigidness that we find ourselves with topics today, right? Politics is an easy one, right? I was watching Star Trek the other day, and I was blown away. There was something they did. It was another race of people, another species that they found. They were dealing with their situation, and they were able to make a comment on our world today in a completely different world using different ideas, but makes you connect those dots in the real world without having to beat us against the head about something that's happening in real life. You just come to that conclusion by following this story, but that's the writing.
Yep. And that was my problem with Star Trek, especially the second season of Discovery, was that they did that too. They were kind of being very heavy-handed, and it was like the best part about Star Trek, every show, was they were superior in their thinking and their intellect and their moral code because they learned from the past. They can call back to say, this was what we used to be. And they would say, for the time, whatever that was, something that was going on at that time, like the LA riots back in DS9 or things like that, like the racism portion that Cisco was always great to call back to. But he was speaking of it from a way of, I don't know that, but I don't know that because we learned from it, and you need to learn from this.
Yep.
And Discovery didn't do that. Discovery was like, this still exists today, and we need to fight it. No, you should be above it and teaching others who are doing it.
Yeah, it's an interesting, and especially from your perspective as a writer and producer, like I see one of the things that I use it just with scientific logic and trying to communicate science is it's I find that when you take people out of their day-to-day and make them imagine, and put them you change the conditions, right, of the test. If you're changing the conditions this is a crazy, like Insurrection is a great example of this. When Picard is talking to the Admiral about how many people does it take? How many people do we have to displace before it becomes wrong? And he doesn't even mention a specific time in history. He doesn't even point out. We all just think of one in our head. That tool, that is, I think, what makes good writing. And I think we're trying to find every opportunity to spread the problems we have today in, every piece of media that's out there. And I'm hoping one of the good things that come from this pandemic shut-in lockdown is that everyone starts writing, because that's all they can do, and we start training those literary skills again.
Yeah, it's actually funny you mentioned that. I do a filmmaking podcast with a friend of mine who runs a film festival, and we were talking about that on it's called Pulling Focus, if you don't mind me saying it. So we were talking about that the other day on the last episode that we're recording. We hope that too. We hope that this isolation helps filmmakers take the time, not just any artist really. It doesn't have to just be filmmakers, but like the writers just write, and try and challenge yourself to not write something that's depressing, write something that's uplifting, because that's a time where we need it. Or just use the elements around you, what you have being trapped inside, to make a movie or something. It can be a short, whatever, but then you can get your work out there. Even if it's just writing treatments and you write 6 or 7 while you're in isolation, when you get out, if you live in LA, or even if you don't, try and sell them, like pitch them, like do whatever you can. Now you have something written. You've used your time wisely,
Yeah.
So I hope a lot of artists take that and run with it. Why not? This is your time. This is so many people's time, where if you can, and I know a lot of people are suffering, and I hate to see that happen, and I'm not belittling that in any way, but if you can use this time to use your creativity towards a goal or a dream you've had, do that.
Yep. Yep, and I totally agree. One of the things I'm doing here, other than the podcast, on my creative side, is I'm going to pull out my trumpet again and start playing. So that it's like I've been wanting to do it. We're stuck inside, if I can, spend an hour or so every other day, and hopefully get to the point where it's every day. It's gonna bring a whole nother facet to what we can bring. So and what I can do as a creative outlet. So I'm with you.
That's the best way to get through this.
Yeah. Awesome. Mike, thank you so much for being on, man. I wish you the best. Tell everybody where they can catch you, where they can see all the podcasts, where you on. Give us where they can find you.
I appreciate that. On social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the whole nine, I'm at The Scene Snob. We always have news and information going on there. But if you go to thescenesnobs.com, all the shows are on there, the links to everything, all our podcast platforms, the YouTube channel, the whole nine. So just go there and you can read up on our shows and things like that. We have new things coming out all the time. And if I can kind of plug one thing, during this isolation, I'm trying to just kind of hold like something fun, like a watch party or something for everybody. And we just had the first one last night. We watched Terror Train. It seemed like horror is kind of the one that everybody's enjoying on a Saturday night. So if you go to the Scene Snobs Facebook page, we're going to be doing a poll, some new movies. You guys choose what you want to watch. Then we all press play on Saturday night at 8 o'clock. We have a thread on the Scene Snobs page where we can just talk about it, have a good time. And then we do a live discussion afterwards where we can all just feel communal and kind of enjoy each other. So please feel free. Anybody who's listening to join in.
Awesome. Dude, thank you. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I wanted to do that back in the day, but it was always like, how do you get people to, be free at the right time? And this is the best time for that. People are literally dying for an excuse to have something regimented in their schedule. So awesome. Yeah. Please go check that out, folks. Thank you again, Mike, for being on.
Thank you for having me. I love this. This was so much fun.
Yeah, man. Let's try and do it again soon. We'll have plenty of time.
That's true.
All right. Be good, everybody. Spread love, spread science. Be good. Peace be with you. Long life. Live long and prosper. We'll see you next time.